The movie begins with a flashback, where a young girl named Madeline Swan takes care of her sick mother while a masked man slowly approaches their home. Madeline spots the man through the window and quickly runs off to hide. The man enters the house and introduces himself as Safin, explaining that he has come for her husband because he was responsible for killing his family. When Madeline's mother refuses to answer him, Safin ends her suffering. Madeline hides underneath the bed as the man desperately searches for her. She successfully stays hidden under the bed, but the man continues looking for her without stopping. Madeline manages to shoot Safin, causing him to collapse onto the floor. After seeing that her mother is already dead, Madeline drags Safin's body outside, but he suddenly regains consciousness. Madeline runs across the frozen lake until she suddenly falls through the ice. Safin cannot bring himself to harm the child or leave her there to die, so he shoots the ice and saves Madeline. The story then returns to the present, where an adult Madeline is living on an island in Italy, together with her boyfriend, James Bond. Even though the two are happy together, Madeline knows that James is still thinking about his former lover, Vesper Lind, who is already dead and buried nearby. Madeline encourages him to finally let go of the past, just like she did with Safin by writing his name on a piece of paper and burning it. The next morning, James decides to follow her advice and visits Vesper's grave to finally forgive her. He also carries a piece of paper with the words "Forgive me" written on it before setting it on fire. Before leaving, James notices a nearby calling card from Spectre, and moments later, the grave suddenly explodes. After regaining consciousness, James quickly gets back on his feet and escapes, but he is soon chased by mercenaries led by a man with a cybernetic eye named Primo. James eventually clashes with Primo, who tells him that his boss, Blofeld, sends his regards, while also revealing that Madeline is the daughter of a Spectre agent. After taking Primo down, James steals his motorcycle and heads back to the hotel. Where he discovers that Madeline has already packed up their belongings, leaving him confused and suspicious. He confronts Madeline and accuses her of revealing his location to their enemies, but she strongly denies it. Despite the tension between them, the two get into a car and are immediately pursued by multiple enemies, while Madeline desperately explains that she would never betray him. Their car eventually crashes, and the enemies quickly surround them before unleashing a storm of bullets, only to realize that the vehicle is bulletproof. James remains completely calm and refuses to make a move, while Madeline begs him to believe her. Once James is finally convinced, he activates the car's machine guns and returns fire at the enemies before releasing a thick cloud of smoke to escape. James later brings Madeline to a train station and sends her away to another place, telling her that they will never see each other again. Just before the train doors fully close, Madeline is seen holding her stomach while quietly crying. 5 years later, a group of mercenaries breaks into an MI6 laboratory. The group is led by Primo, and they are working for Blofeld, the leader of the criminal organization known as Spectre. Their mission is to steal a bioweapon called Heracles and use it for evil purposes. However, a corrupt scientist named Valdo receives a call from his boss, Safin, warning him that enemies are coming and assuring him that they will spare him because they still need him alive. The mercenaries capture Valdo, along with another scientist, before eliminating everyone else inside the lab. They came for Heracles, a deadly bioweapon that can act as a poison through physical contact. After securing what they came for, Primo takes out one of the scientists and leaves with Valdo.
Lockdown in progress. Seats are now sealed.
Magnets.
MI6 eventually learns about the incident, where Moneypenny explains the situation to their boss, M, although he remains secretive about what Heracles truly is, and instead asks about the whereabouts of 007. James has already retired from MI6 and is now living a peaceful life in Jamaica. After preparing for his day, he unexpectedly runs into his old close friend Felix, who is still working as a CIA agent. Felix is currently on an assignment and introduces James to his partner, Logan. The three later head to a nightclub, where Felix tells James about Valdo's kidnapping and the attack on the laboratory. James shows little interest in helping recover Valdo, but he also admits to Felix that he has a suspicious feeling about Logan. When James tries to head home, he discovers that his car has been sabotaged. A woman named Nomi approaches him and offers him a ride on her motorcycle. Once they arrive at their destination, Nomi reveals that she is an MI6 agent, and not just any ordinary one, because she has officially replaced him as the new 007. She tells James that recovering Valdo is now her main mission, and warns him not to interfere. However, she knows that is unlikely to happen because of how serious the situation has become, so she gives James a phone and tells him to contact M before saying that they will meet again in Cuba. Meanwhile, M and Tanner speak with their hacker and tech specialist, Q, regarding the stolen files taken from the laboratory. James contacts M and questions him about his involvement with Valdo and Spectre, but M refuses to answer. M later tells Tanner that he wants to speak with Blofeld, who is currently imprisoned in Belmarsh and appears to be talking to himself. Despite the warnings, James calls Felix and tells him that he accepts the job as a CIA agent. The following day, Felix sends James to Cuba, where he discovers that Nomi has already arrived as well. James then meets his mission partner, Paloma.
Okay, come here.
Each other just a little bit before we,
No.
Who gives him clothes to wear for the upcoming party. The two successfully infiltrate the event, and Paloma places an earpiece on James so they can stay in contact before separating to search for Valdo inside the party. Meanwhile, Valdo is being forced to set up Heracles inside the facility, but it is revealed that he secretly replaced the hard drive from the device. Back with James, they discover that most of the guests attending the party are Spectre agents, and that the real event is actually a birthday celebration for Blofeld, who is using Primo's cybernetic eye to watch everything from prison. Paloma spots Valdo attempting to escape and decides to chase after him, while James is suddenly recognized through Blofeld's eye, almost as if Blofeld already knew he would come, causing everyone to turn their attention toward him. The Heracles poison is then released into the room with the intention of eliminating James while leaving the Spectre agents unharmed. However, because of Valdo's actions, the exact opposite happens, and the Spectre agents end up being the ones affected by the poison instead.
It is working, only Spectre are dying.
As chaos erupts everywhere, James and Paloma chase after Valdo and manage to take the hard drive from him. The two fight off every attacker in their way while trying to escape with Valdo, but Nomi suddenly appears and quickly captures the scientist herself. Paloma continues fighting the enemies, while James chases after Nomi, who is also being attacked by even more enemies outside. Valdo attempts to escape, but Paloma spots him and uses a vehicle to crash into the platform he is standing on, sending him falling down. James rushes over to capture Valdo, and the three quickly escape together, while Nomi finds herself surrounded by police officers, but still manages to find a way out. Paloma says her goodbye to James, since her mission ends there, so James immediately boards a waiting plane with Valdo to meet up with Felix. They eventually arrive at Felix's boat, where Logan is also waiting, and James tells them that all the Spectre agents at the party died because of Valdo. James starts questioning Valdo about Heracles and asks why the weapon did not affect him, but Logan becomes nervous and orders James to stop interrogating him, claiming that he no longer has the authority and that his mission is already over. Despite this, James continues pressuring Valdo, forcing the scientist to reveal that Spectre was actually the main target of Heracles, so he modified the DNA sample to take them out instead of James. Valdo also reveals that M helped create Heracles with good intentions for the bioweapon, but he eventually lost control of it after it was stolen from the lab. When James asks how Blofeld knew he would be there, he suddenly realizes that Logan is actually a double agent working for Satan. In the middle of the chaos, Logan shoots Felix before getting into a brutal fight with James. Logan eventually gets hold of a gun, forcing James to escape downstairs, where Logan traps him together with Felix. Logan plants explosives around the area before escaping with Valdo on a plane and blowing up the boat. James tries to save Felix, but both of them know that his injuries are far too severe, so in the end, he says goodbye to his closest friend and lets him go. Heartbroken, James leaves Felix behind before finally managing to escape. After being rescued by a naval ship, James heads to the MI6 headquarters to confront M. He explains that Blofeld tried to harm him using Heracles, but Valdo was ordered by his boss to target the Spectre agents instead. Now that Heracles is close to falling into the wrong hands, James claims that he can identify the person responsible for kidnapping Valdo. In exchange, he asks to speak with Blofeld in prison to get answers, but M refuses because Blofeld is the last remaining member of Spectre. Their argument becomes so heated that James completely loses respect for M, leading M to eventually throw him out of the room. M later orders Nomi to go to Belmarsh prison and carry out an inspection on Blofeld. As James leaves, Moneypenny quietly offers to help him. They head to Q's house and ask him to examine the contents of the hard drive they recovered from Valdo. Once Q accesses the files, they discover data specifically targeting Spectre agents, meaning Blofeld is now the last surviving member of Spectre since he remains imprisoned. There are also thousands of other files containing DNA samples from people all around the world. James asks Q to bring him to Belmarsh prison so he can meet Blofeld, but they explain that only one person currently has access to him, and it turns out to be Madeline, who is now working as a psychiatrist. Madeline later heads to her office and meets her newest patient, Safin, although she does not recognize him at first, until he reveals his cracked mask. Tears begin falling from Madeline's eyes as Safin tells her that he needs her help to take down Blofeld by spraying poison onto her wrist so it can infect the Spectre leader through physical contact. Safin warns her that she must do it, or the people she loves will be in danger. Meanwhile, outside the headquarters, James and M calmly discuss the situation and what they must do to save humanity from the danger of Heracles. They later return to headquarters, where M officially announces to the entire team that James has been reinstated as an MI6 agent. The team studies files connected to the funeral of a Spectre operative, where 5 family members who came into contact with him are now dead because of the spread of Heracles. M explains that Heracles was never meant to become this dangerous because it was originally designed only for specific targets. Through close physical contact, people outside the target group were not supposed to be affected, but it has now been modified and weaponized using nanobots capable of killing both the targets and anyone connected to them. M approves James's request to meet Blofeld in hopes of learning more, while Nomi is assigned to track down Valdo. Later that day, Madeline prepares to meet Blofeld and secretly sprays the poison onto her wrist. James eventually arrives as well, and the two reunite after 5 years, although Madeline refuses to shake his hand. As Blofeld approaches them, Madeline suddenly becomes nervous and asks to leave. James grabs her hand, but Madeline tells him she cannot go through with it, so James agrees to let her leave. James is then left alone with Blofeld, who mocks him and reveals that he personally arranged the attack at Vesper's grave just to make James believe Madeline had betrayed him. Meanwhile, Q examines Blofeld's cybernetic eye connected to Primo, eventually tracing Logan's location and passing the information to Nomi so she can pursue him. James calmly questions Blofeld about the people who stole Heracles, but Blofeld claims that all the answers James seeks can be found through Madeline. James refuses to believe him and eventually grabs Blofeld by the throat out of frustration. Tanner quickly stops him and begins scolding James for his actions, but at that exact moment, they realize that Blofeld has suddenly died after being infected by the poison transferred from James's hand. James finally realizes that he himself has been infected with Heracles after touching Madeline, and that the poison will remain inside his body forever. Moneypenny later informs James that Madeline cannot be found in her apartment, but James already knows where she is hiding. James travels to Norway and visits the same house where Madeline lived as a child. He finally reunites with Madeline, apologizes to her, and admits that he still loves her. James tells her that he regrets letting her leave alone on the train years ago. As James approaches her, Madeline forgives him, but a young girl suddenly appears nearby. Madeline introduces the child as her daughter, Mathilde, although she tells James that the girl is not his child. After putting Mathilde to sleep, Madeline finally explains who Safin truly is. She reveals that Blofeld once ordered Madeline's father to wipe out Safin's entire family, leaving Safin as the only survivor. Madeline also mentions an island owned by Safin's family, which is now being used as the center of his operations. James immediately calls Q and gives him all the information needed to locate Safin. The following morning, James is awakened by Mathilde, who asks him to make breakfast. Later, James receives a call from Q, who reveals information about an island located between Japan and Russia. Moneypenny also reports that Nomi is closing in on Logan's location, but James suddenly realizes that Logan and his men are already heading toward them. James immediately takes action and helps Madeline and Mathilde into the car so they can escape, but they soon encounter 2 suspicious vehicles. Those same vehicles eventually begin chasing them, forcing James to fight back. James manages to take down both enemy vehicles, but more enemies suddenly arrive moments later. A massive chase soon erupts, and James successfully loses the enemies after driving deep into a dense forest. The group exits the vehicle, and James hides Madeline and Mathilde in a safe location. James then begins taking down the enemies hunting him one by one. He eventually spots Logan, who tries to attack him, but James quickly destroys their vehicle.
You won't be able to stop. So why don't you help me out, brother?
James successfully brings down Logan, but on the other side, Safin manages to capture Madeline and Mathilde. James attempts to chase after them, but Safin escapes aboard a helicopter. As James walks alone along the road, Nomi suddenly arrives and gives him a ride to the airport, where Q is already waiting for them. M explains that their mission now has 3 objectives: confirm the location of Heracles, take out Safin and Valdo, and rescue Madeline and her daughter. Q then prepares all the high-tech equipment they will need for the mission. Meanwhile, Safin brings Madeline and Mathilde to his garden, where different poisonous plants are cultivated, including the nanobots harvested to spread the Heracles poison. Safin orders Madeline to be locked inside a room, separating her from her daughter. James and Nomi use a high-tech aircraft to travel to the island, eventually entering through the water. James uses his high-tech watch to disable the CCTV cameras before the two infiltrate the facility and silently eliminate the guards one by one. They eventually reach the laboratory, capture Valdo, and plan to destroy the entire place, despite not having enough explosives to fully wipe it out. Safin contacts James through the speakers and tells him that he wants to have a serious conversation so they can come to an understanding. James decides to personally hunt down Safin and instructs Nomi to take Valdo and destroy the lab if necessary. Meanwhile, Madeline manages to escape from Primo by throwing hot coffee directly into his face. James eventually finds Safin holding Mathilde hostage and threatening to end her life right in front of him. James immediately stops and drops to his knees, begging Safin not to involve the child. However, James secretly grabs his gun and quickly neutralizes all the guards, while Safin escapes through a hatch. Madeline suddenly arrives and reunites with James, while Safin escapes alongside Mathilde and his guards, but the young girl suddenly bites Safin's hand. Annoyed by the child's behavior, Safin eventually lets her go. Meanwhile, Nomi finds herself surrounded by armed enemies, but because Valdo is with her, they hesitate to attack. However, irritated by the scientist's non-stop talking, Nomi shoves Valdo into the nanobot water, causing his body to slowly dissolve. The remaining workers immediately run away from the water after witnessing its horrifying effects. Nomi fights off the guards while James and Madeline discover Mathilde hiding underneath a table. The group continues escaping until they finally reunite with Nomi. James contacts Q and requests a missile strike later on to destroy the entire island, since it is the main production site of Heracles. James places the others onto a small boat to get them away from the island safely. He says goodbye to Madeline and promises that he will return soon because he still has to finish everything. James continues alone, taking down most of the guards while ordering his allies to launch the missile attack because it is now the only way to stop Heracles. James must reach the control room and open the blast doors so the missiles can enter the facility instead of being blocked, forcing him to continue fighting through countless enemies. He eventually encounters Primo, and James uses his high-tech watch to overload Primo's cybernetic eye, instantly killing him. James finally reaches the control room and opens the doors, prompting M to immediately order the nearby naval ship to launch its missiles toward the island. However, while trying to leave, James notices that the doors are beginning to close again, forcing him to rush back and reopen them, but Safin suddenly appears and shoots him several times in the back. As Safin approaches him, James suddenly fights back and brutally breaks his arm. Safin then reveals that during their fight earlier, he secretly rubbed the poison onto James, meaning both of them are now infected, and anyone they touch will eventually become infected and die as well. Despite this, James finishes off Safin and continues making his way back to the control room. He successfully reopens the blast doors and tells Q that there is no longer any way for him to survive, so he asks to speak with Madeline one last time. James talks to her and explains that he can no longer leave the island because the poison inside him could endanger them. Knowing there is no other choice, the two share their final words with each other, and Madeline finally admits that Mathilde is truly James's daughter.
I know.
As the missiles arrive, the entire island explodes together with James. Everyone is left devastated by the tragedy and mourns the loss of their greatest agent. In the final scene, the entire MI6 team returns to headquarters and gathers together to honor James, their finest agent. Meanwhile, Madeline brings Mathilde to Italy so they can continue their lives there peacefully. She begins telling Mathilde the story of her father, a man named Bond, James Bond. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more movies coming your way.